Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here, VideoCopilot.net, and welcome back to another very exciting product reveal. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Element 3D version 2. Some of you know that Element 3D has always been about speed, and in version 2, it's still our top priority. So what we did is reworked the entire render engine. So that's why I've got this engine here rendering, so you can actually see it working. No, we actually reworked it to be faster, to be more efficient. So you're actually going to get way better performance inside of After Effects. You're actually going to get better render speeds. So I've got projects that I created with version 1.6 that render twice as fast in version 2 on the same graphics card. So we really made it more efficient, and we made the pipeline fully take advantage of your graphics card. So after we made the rendering faster, we wanted to make it so that you could work faster. So we redesigned the user interface to be more productive. So here are a few new features. Now, the first thing you might notice is that the preview window renders extremely fast, and that's because it's drawing directly to the screen from the graphics card. Another cool thing that we added are these orthographic views, so you can go to the top view or the front view. You can also bring up a grid. We've got some view options here, so you can kind of turn on some of the different features of the preview window. Go and switch it back. Another thing you might notice is that there is a gizmo so that you can actually move things around. You can even hold Alt, drag, and duplicate objects. And you'll see also that it's in a nice group folder. So this is a way that you can create more complex scenes inside of a single group. Another cool thing you could do is create some basic primitives right inside of Element, so they're all editable. Segment size, all that good stuff, so you can start creating some of those basic shapes without having to leave Element. Now, over here in the scene, we have an object. We've got the materials. And one cool thing you can do is you can actually select a material in the preview window. So you can click on it, and now I've selected that copper. I could go down, tweak the settings. Now I've got silver. You can actually select multiple materials this way. So you can hold down Shift, select multiple parts, and actually move them all together. Then, if you just select the main object, you can move it all together as a single part. And the reason that works is Element 3D version 2 now lets you use the mesh as individual objects. So all of the sub-meshes of this object are now visible, and you have independent transform. Now, a couple other cool features. We've got better preview thumbnails to give you a sense of what the materials are. We've added these shortcut buttons to the edit window. So sometimes it could be a lot of work scrolling through a lot of stuff. So now you can just click on the shortcut and it just auto scrolls down to that position. So save you some time, especially if you're just going to do specific things. Say, let me get to the UV mapping. Here, let me get to the transform. So you can jump around a lot faster. We've also got the search bar in the model browser. And you can also add external directories into the favorites. So that way you can get to some of your files wherever they may be. All right, so now that we have this out of the way, let's go and check out some more of the exciting features. Okay, so this is probably one of my favorite new features. We've added real-time physical-based shaders. So what that does is just gives you opportunities to create much more realistic shaders based on actual physical properties. It actually makes it easier to create more realistic materials. So let's jump into the scene setup, and we'll take a look at how it works. So down here, I've got all the physical-based shaders, and you can see some very nice detail. Very, very cool. And one of the main advantages is that I can turn all of the lighting off, and they still are illuminated. So all of the lighting and highlights are all based on the environment map. So if you load some different environment maps, and in this case we have an environment map preset here, and I just got a couple of random ones in here. Let's see, some work in progress. But if we load one, you can see that it totally changes the look of the shaders based on the environment map. And so we can kind of keep clicking through a few different ones here. And there we go. We have a totally different look. Now, you can, of course, add lighting on top of it, so you can have lights and stuff like that, but you definitely get a much more realistic result, And no matter what the environment map is, the shaders will all look realistic relative to each other. All right, let's compare the standard shader and the physical shader. So on the standard shader on the left, we can scroll down and we have our specular setting and we can kind of control this. But the problem is if the specular is really blurred out, then the reflection should be blurred out as well. And so already I'm making an unrealistic material that would not and could not exist. Whereas if I come over to the physical shader, all I have to worry about is one setting, and that's the glossiness. So if we take that setting and we turn it down, we're sort of blurring out the reflection. So it's just a simple way to think about blurring a surface. But what's cool about the physical shader is that we can put a texture into the glossy map. And check this out. Now we've created a much more realistic surface because there's variation in the reflectivity and the specular highlights. And we can actually tweak that. So we can come in here, we could turn the brightness up, make it really washed out or nice and sharp. We can even invert it and create kind of like a fogged looking shader, something like that. And it's all real time. So for anyone who's used some of the advanced renderers like V-Ray, you're probably familiar with a glossiness slider. And as you guys probably know, that once you start having blurry reflections, you have to turn up the samples and the render times get a lot slower. So the cool thing about Element is that you actually can do all of the glossiness effects and do it in real time. So it's very powerful. And the shader itself is actually simpler because you don't have to worry about as many settings. You have reflectivity and refraction just the same. Like check this out, I'll just turn the reflectivity down, right? So there's no more reflectivity. This is a really cool black material. But watch what happens when I turn up the refraction. Check that out. Now I've got this kind of like ice look, and let's see here. And we've almost got this very realistic kind of ice cube material. And again, it's very easy to make realistic shaders because the physical shader doesn't really allow you to do things that are too unrealistic. But we also realize that people are going to use the shader for motion graphics and advertising, and we have an environment multiplier. So that allows you just to kind of boost the brightness of that particular effect so that you get a much more, intense reflection, because sometimes you want things to really be out there. And, of course, we'll have more tutorials to show you guys how to make all kinds of metal and all these kind of cool things that you can create on your own. Let's just click on a few different shaders here. Let's just take a look so you can kind of see the variation. And, the fun thing is that you can just go into that glossiness map and you can just tweak it. You can invert it, turn the gamma up, play around with the brightness, and you could really create some interesting surfaces. We've got this nice concrete looking wall, ground, and you notice like something like the ground, I don't see all those highlights because the ground isn't that reflective. So you're not going to see those bright highlights that you're going to see on some of these other kind of metallic surfaces. So let's kind of take a look at a few more here. That's where once you get in here and you start playing with real-time physical shaders, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of cool. Now, of course, the standard shader is still really useful because there are times when you need to create unrealistic materials. So we make it so that you can use either one. You just go to the top material type, choose between the standard shader and the physical shader. So I hope you guys are as excited about this as I am. We think it's a big deal. Okay, so here's another really fun feature. So I've got my engine block on this semi-reflective surface, and the only thing that's missing is my reflection. So what we've done is added a feature that allows you to create a mirror reflection on a flat surface. So check this out. If we take the plane object, we can come over to the object setting for the reflect mode, set it to mirror surface, and instantly we get a really cool, very nice looking reflective surface. So I can go into that glossiness map and make some changes. So I can invert it. You can kind of see how that affects the reflection, so it's kind of diffused. I can even increase the normal bump amount, and that will also kind of displace. So this is a very powerful feature that's well integrated to the entire render pipeline. And just for reference, this feature works with objects that are not just flat, but have a flat surface on them like the top of this helipad. All right, so let's go and take a look at another example. So I've got a car here, and I've got the blue box here. It's reflecting on the ground. The car is reflecting. It's looking good, but I don't see the blue box reflecting on the car. So we wanted to come up with a solution that would help fake a reflection, but also render really, really fast. So let me show you what we came up with. I'm going to go inside of the scene setup, and I'm going to go to the car model here, and I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go down to the reflection mode, and we're going to change it to spherical. And what that will do is that will essentially create a spherical map from the center of the object outward. And anything that it captures in that map, it will render as its own reflection. So check this out. I've got a box. It's just a light box. And I'm going to hit OK. And right away, we can kind of see, and in the reflection settings, I can disable the spherical, or I can disable the mirror mode on the ground. And it's cool. It works pretty well. But check this out. I'm going to turn on that white box. Okay, so here it is up here. And I have it controlled by a null. So watch this. As I move it around, I can get it to create some really nice reflections across my car. Now, here's the fun part, is that see how we can see it in the shot? What I can do is go into the scene setup, select that box object, go down to the material, go to the advanced, and turn off visible to camera. And we don't need it to cast shadows, and we can ignore the AO. We hit OK. So now we don't even see it, but it's creating some nice reflection for us. So it's not exactly ray tracing, but you're going to get some great results with some excellent performance. Here's another subtle example. So if I turn off the spherical map, it's no longer reflecting the ground. So by turning it on, I'm able to create a darker inside ring for that to look like it's actually sitting on the ground. So if we look in here closely, what if I take this ground surface and maybe change the color of it? Now you can really see how it is affecting the wheel and how it's inheriting a little bit of the color. All right, now I know a lot of you guys are going to be excited about our next feature, and that is real-time shadow mapping inside of Element 3D. So native shadows, and they look good, they render fast, and you definitely have a lot of control. So you have control over the map resolution. You can also kind of soften the map out, and there's options for spotlights and parallel lights. So we're really excited to have it. Now, one little side feature you might notice is that we have a particle size XYZ now. So you can actually stretch objects even non-uniformly and animate them in their particle settings. So that's how I set up that animation. All right, so let's take a look at a more advanced example with shadow. So here we have a city block from Metropolitan. And if we swing around here and look at this area right here, what I'm going to do is scroll down and go to the ambient occlusion. Now I'm going to turn off the ambient occlusion. So here's how the shadows look. They're just kind of casting a straight shadow. But when we turn on the ambient occlusion, it kind of looks like global illumination in a way, because we have some nice gradients in the shadow. But here's the cool new feature that we added. It's called light influence. So if we turn this down to 0, this is what the default method was doing. Basically, it was casting ambient occlusion across the entire image, which is not quite accurate when you have a direct light. So what happens is when you turn up this influence, it hides the ambient occlusion in the areas with direct sunlight. And if we look at the output for the ambient occlusion, you can see that it's a much more realistic of a result because of how it gets cut off. So if I were to change this back down, you would see that it's kind of thrown all around. But by tying it to the illumination, we can create a much more realistic result. So when we put it all back together, we get a really nice, really realistic result. Got our shadows, got our ambient occlusion, creating our global illumination, and it is looking good. Now, another feature related to shadows and ambient occlusion is a good matte shadow object. And what this allows you to do is cast a shadow onto your own video source or background. So in this case, we can just turn the background off, and we can see that we're kind of casting that shadow. We've got a light set up, and it's looking really good. And it's also really fast. So it's really easy to composite your 3D with your live action. All right, this next feature is really exciting, or at least I think it will be to a lot of people. So we all love real-time shadows, and we love real-time ambient occlusion. But sometimes we just need more accuracy. So what we've done is implemented ray-traced shadows and ray-traced ambient occlusion. So if I turn off the ambient occlusion and I turn off the shadows, what we have is the standard render from Element 3D. But now we can combine it with the ray-traced shadows and the ray-traced ambient occlusion and create some really impressive results. Now, the thing about ray-traced ambient occlusion is that it really creates a nice global illumination look, and it renders relatively fast for a ray tracer. Our ray tracer is GPU accelerated. It uses OpenCL, so it works on ATI and NVIDIA cards. Now, if you've ever seen a real-time ray trace renderer, you see the samples kind of fill in as the time goes by. So you can kind of see the frame fill up and the noise sort of slowly go away. Now, the way that After Effects works is you have to define how many samples you want. So if you want to get interactive performance, what you can do, set the render mode to preview, and that will lower the amount of ray trace samples, and you can actually move around and set your shot up pretty reasonably. Of course, it was a lot of work to get this ray tracing to work. We know it's not for everybody. We just figured there's going to be cases where you need that accuracy, and we wanted to make that feature available. So check it out, ray traced shadows and ray traced ambient occlusion. All right, I want to show you this next feature. It's called the Auxilary Animation. So inside of Element 3D, we've got 5 groups. But watch what I can do with just a single group. So here I've got this spaceship, right? What I can do is I can select these engines on the outside. So I'll just select those, and I can move it around, okay? I could even take the rotation tool and I could rotate it, right? But what if I want to animate just this part in After Effects? Well, here's what I can do. If I select that object, I can come down here. We've got Transform, and then we've got the Auxilary Animation. And what I can do is output that to a channel. So in this case, I can output it to channel 1. So now if I hit OK, I can go inside of Group 1, open up the auxiliary channel, and now I have access to the scale and the rotation, the opacity, and even some UV options. So this becomes extremely powerful because then you can create some simple rigs. Stuff like cars, stuff like helicopters, any kind of thing where you just need to grab a couple of parts and animate them together. And the other fun thing about it is that you can export multiple things to the same channel. So if I had a car, I could actually put 4 wheels onto a single channel, and if I rotated that forward, all of the wheels would rotate together with one single slider. So what's cool about this is that once I animate it, I can actually go into the particle replicator and move it all as a single object. So I can maybe have it, I don't know. All right, let's try this. So something like that, I guess. Another cool use is if you're doing a title and you want to control, say, one character. Well, what I can do is switch to Mesh View, go to that extrusion object, and I could just click on the Auxiliary Animation, output this to, say, channel 1, hit OK. Go to Auxiliary Channel 1, and then I can just, rotate this or do something else with it and have full control over it. Amazing. All right, here's another really cool way to use the Auxiliary Animation. So go in the setup, and what I'm going to do is select the rotor. So I'm going to select this rotor, go down to the Auxiliary Animation, set it to channel 1. Then I'm going to click on the other one and set it to channel 1. So now I'm going to hit OK. And if I go down to Group 1, Auxiliary Channel 1, I can animate the rotation. So let's see here. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Except this particular helicopter, these blades rotate opposite each other. So what you can do is go back in the setup, click on one of the rotors, and set the animation ratio for channel 1 to -100. And that will work kind of like an expression. So if I hit OK, now you're going to see that the rotors are going to rotate opposite of each other. So this is much more realistic, but also I'm controlling both rotors with a single slider. So it's a really cool feature, and hopefully you can do a lot with it. All right, you're probably too worn out to see any more features, but here's one more. We've got Subsurface Scattering. So for people who know what this is, bam. And I can kind of show you the idea. If we go to Subsurface Scattering and turn it off, we have a much more solid character. But if we turn it on, we've got like a translucent meat bag. So depending on what you're going for, and you have things like intensity, so you can control the type of meat, and you also can control the scattering. So that may not seem terribly useful because maybe you're not making a creature, whatever, right? But it's great for like porcelain. Let's say you're doing a statue and you want to have like a nice marble. Another example is with these green plants. So what kind of gives it this sort of lush feeling is that I have the subsurface scattering on. So we'll go down here. And it's so if I turn it off, that's what it looks like. I mean, sure, I could turn on some ambient light, but turning on the scattering actually creates the effect of the light penetrating through the leaves, as if the translucency of the leaves allows some of the light to pass through. We've also added a feature to automatically import MTL files. So if I open up an OBJ that has an MTL file, click Open, load materials, hit OK. And here they are, materials loaded up. Just go down to that glass. Give it a little reflectivity. So, of course, you want to go and tweak the shaders, but most of the work is done. All right, so here's a cool feature if you feel like 5 groups is not enough. So after you've exhausted the scene system that allows you to add essentially unlimited objects into a group, after you have exhausted all of the auxiliary animation capabilities in order to rig and animate your object, and you have so many objects that you just have to have more groups, here's what you can do. Go to your layer that has element and add another copy of element. So in this case, I'm just going to duplicate this copy. Okay? And what it's going to do is overwrite this. But if you come down to the bottom, see it says render mode, change it from full render to unified render. And what it will do is only use the render settings from the top copy. So watch this. I'm going to go to group 1. I'm going to take this spacecraft and I'm going to move it down. And I'm going to move it forward. And now you can see both objects are intersecting fully, and I've created a super spaceship. No, but the point is now I've got 5 more groups. And yes, you can do this again. You can duplicate it again. As long as you have enough graphics card memory and you're feeling lucky, you can add some more groups by simply using the unified render. Now, there is one nice feature that I forgot to mention, and that is the enhanced multisampling. So it's similar to super sampling, except it's faster. So if I zoom into this area right here, see these kind of like speckled dots right here? If I turn on the enhanced multisampling, it actually cleans them up a lot nicer. So you can kind of see the difference there, rounds the edge a little bit better, and you can use it in combination with super sampling to get even better, cleaner results. So hopefully that will help out in some tricky situations. All right, guys, thank you so much for taking a look at this video. Hopefully you guys get a good sense of what we're trying to do with Element 3D version 2. We've really put a lot of work and a lot of effort into this, and hopefully you guys check it out in November. I'm Andrew Kramer. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.